To contract the pelvic floor, first you need to establish the abdominal breath. And as you learned in the intro, it's important that while exhaling, the diaphragm goes upwards. You also contract the pelvic floor so that both diaphragms move in the same direction. And then imagine the pelvic floor where it's sitting and go through all 4 points where the pelvic floor is hooked on the pelvis. So first it was the pubic bone, the tailbone and the 2 sitting bones. Imagine these 4 points as a square, and then you bring these 4 points into its center, in the middle, and then contract and lifting it up with the exhalation. While inhaling, you release and relax. So breathe in, release, and exhale, contract. And most people, as I said in the intro as well, have a too tight pelvic floor, so make an emphasis also on the relaxation and end the practice with deep, long breaths where you completely relax the pelvic floor. I would like to add some points to the pelvic floor. After you establish the perception of the pelvic floor in general, you can go into a more subtle contraction. And this corresponds to the mudras, the ashwini mudra, sahajoli and vajroli mudra. And the mudras aim to be energetic contraction, but they're also introduced as a physical contraction. So we can build a bridge from the physical practice of the pelvic floor into more a subtle practice. First of all, bring to mind the square of the pelvic floor, having the pubic bone, the tailbone and the 2 sitting bones, and then divide this square, this muscle of sheath, into 2 triangles. The first one is from the pubic bone to the 2 sit bones, and the second one is from the tailbone to the 2 sit bones. And the first triangle correlates to vajroli sahajoli mudra and the second to ashwini mudra. So start contracting the muscles around the urethra, and then you get a perception or contraction of the first triangle. And that's the same contraction what you do in vajroli sahajoli mudra. And it helps when you sit, tilt the pelvis a bit forward, and this helps to get the better perception or a better contraction. And you're not tilting the pelvis in the asana, you just do this for getting a better perception. And try this for a few times, then relax, that's very important, and then change to ashwini mudra, and for that you tilt the pelvis a bit back. That helps to contract the sphincter of the anus. And most people, and this depends on several factors, have a too tight pelvic floor. So be mindful not to think all the time about contraction and training, and rather than think of relaxation, that you introduce relaxation practices in the asana classes. And one good practice is that you visualize the pelvic floor as a cloth or as a scarf, a light scarf which is swaying or swinging with the wind or with the wind, and here the wind is the breath. And this can be done in all positions. So you inhale and you completely let go of the pelvic floor. And when you exhale, you're not contracting, you just let the pelvic floor swing deep into the pelvis, and then again inhale and let go completely. So that's a good practice for relaxation of the pelvic floor. One additional comment to kandharasana. This posture is good to train the pelvic floor. So when you go into the practice, switch on the core, lift up the pelvis, then see what happens. The weight of the organ is going upwards and the pelvic floor is released from the weight. So for many people this posture is easier to get a better perception of the pelvic floor. So then you imagine the 4 points where the pelvic floor is hooked on the pelvis, and then try to contract these 4 points, bring them into the center and lift them up with the exhalation. And remember that contracting the buttocks is not switching on the pelvic floor. That's a different practice. So if you move, as you just saw it, then you don't have the pelvic floor switched on, and we only want the pelvic floor. So make sure that you have this subtlety in the practice, and kandharasana helps you to train the pelvic floor.